Welcome, everybody. The days past not being able to pull together a quorum. I see we've got one. This is a special meeting of the Common Council, City of Oneonta, January 19th, just past 7 o'clock. And the clerk will call the roll. Here.
Councilmember Murphy. Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Richburger.
Here.
Councilmember Carson. Here. Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Nancy.
Here.
Councilmember Raptor.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Okay. Join me in that pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I see David. So I know we're going to see an Oneonta Community Initiative invitation. All right.
I sent you guys all the reports
Thank you.
on the whole year. The information on the OCI program is in there, as far as the 12 applicants. I wasn't 100% sure like what type of presentation you wanted, but these were kind of the figures that were going out there. And so like the clicks on our website was 464 people clicked on that page for the OCI program. But we only had 12 applicants that actually filled it out. A lot of people, when I said that, okay, so you're responsible for getting the permits, they're like, what do you mean? I just want the program done. Like, so I think a lot of people are a little bit confused on that they almost don't want to do the work, is what it seems like to me with talking to them on the phone. And then just with even just telling them, well, these, this is where you find all the applicants to fill out for the permits, stuff like that. Talk to Carrie, talk to myself. We're here to help, and nothing. So as far as trying to get them to actually do the program, it's kind of hard to force them. I think there were a lot of great ideas, just people that wanted the idea and somebody else to do it. So there were quite a few that I told, well, can we find somebody else that can do your idea, either with you or for you, or somehow do it with other people. So kind of
Talk about those that have gone through the process and the type of thing.
not the ones that have gone through the process, just the numerous, probably 150 phone calls personally that I've taken. And just people have ideas. A lot of them, not so much, wouldn't fit the program. But there were several that I felt would have been a good option to continue to do the program, but they just never followed through.
All right. If you know more, let me open this up to questions from
Mhm.
council. David?
Just a couple of questions.
Yep.
The 850 or up to 850 approved for Roots and also the Historical Society, are those separate dollar amounts for those?
Correct.
groups?
Those are two different applications, applicants. And so those are two separate programs, because they're different parts of that alleyway that they want to light up.
And what is the Sprinkle Project?
That was, it was called the Sprinkle Project. They were out on Main Street with the big signs saying, you can do it, Mom, good job. And it was kind of like almost like a picket line, but with inspirational sayings that they lined all of Main Street one Saturday. And that money actually went to buy the actual signs, so they could do that multiple times without it now costing anything. Just the people to pull it up.
Was there an event that went along with that? Or they were just standing out?
I don't think they had like an event like on Facebook. They were just out there. They had a specific day that they were out there. So you would only see that event if you drove down Main Street.
I can just embellish that a little bit, so that it's like a national project and
True.
like Sprinkle Finance or something. And so the national group has these signs and local groups get together and they read the signs and they'll ship them and then they have to pay to ship it to the next place, and that's where this came in, right?
Yes, but it was,
Anecdotally, I think I heard this, that if they bought them, that they.
it was cheaper.
It was cheap.
It was cheaper to buy the signs than to ship them out to the next place.
And it's like an encouragement project, so they hold signs, right?
Yeah.
They're like, you're amazing, or whatever, and it's just like, they're trying to sprinkle kindness.
I should have included.
I remember seeing a picture of it. I didn't see it when it happened, but I remember seeing a picture.
Further questions from council? Scott?
Can we talk about our Main Street closure again for a little bit?
Yeah.
Quick second,
Sorry, before we jump topics, I had a question about OCI.
Yeah.
Sorry. So could you, some of these have a little bit more information than others, so like, for example, there was a project from the elementary school that wasn't approved. Could you just embellish on like why?
Because what I got back from the committee who approves these,
Okay.
because DO does
Okay,
not
I
approve
don't
these.
approve them.
It was it was a project that the classroom wanted to do,
Okay.
so it was just designated to just that classroom.
It's like a narrow scope.
Yes,
Okay.
and I can, give me 1 second, I can pull that contract out. The application, to give you a better idea.
And there are two here that are from Flower Project. Is that the same group who's been awarded it twice? Or-
Same group, yes, but different projects.
Okay.
So the Greater Plains, it was the occupational therapy wanted to create a motor lab within the elementary school. And then, so then the two projects, one, they want to plant in the circular planters on Main Street.
Uh-huh.
And then the other one, they want to do build the in-ground planters.
Can I just ask a question? Are they affiliated with the garden club?
They are not affiliated, but they've been working with the garden club.
Okay, great.
Because that was one of my questions too, is I don't want you doing anything until you talk to them,
Okay.
but
I'm
yes.
just glad. Thank you. Okay, that's all my questions about the OCI. Thank you.
I've got one more question.
Yep.
The flower project, the plant spring annual for both circular planters located on Main Street. We usually pay for that out of the budget, and we have the garden club do that, don't we?
That's typically planted in around June, first or second week of June. I think the idea of talking to Chris is this group's going to plan something earlier, spring. So there's a longer period of time, especially around Memorial Day.
And bulbs, so they come back every year,
Yay.
is what I understand.
Those are brand,
I think that's in-ground planters.
right?
They were talking about pansies when I met with them last week. Planting pansies in April
Okay.
and then doing a new planting in June.
I think the in-ground plant.
I'm not quite sure how I feel about us using this money for something that has been in the city budget, granted, a couple months later, but we've been doing that for years, and I don't want us to get into the habit of then using this money to pay for things and taking them out of the budget and relying on this program to take care of things that City Hall and our city budget should be taken care of already. So
I can see that. One thing that I can kind of, I guess, propose is, because I didn't know that about the budget and all that stuff. You know, there's a lot of questions with the OCI program amongst myself, with DO and the committee. I'm wondering if there's a way that we could somehow loop somebody in City Hall in with that project to help with that.
As I'm looking at it, there are a couple of things that I might be the most obvious person to be looped into this.
Okay,
And as I'm looking at it, you're describing some disconnect in the application process to their expectations around getting permits and this and that. And I think there's probably something we can do about addressing that. We can have a bit more about an easier workflow for them. up with that, we can talk about that. Maybe as well. I know that in looking at this, this is a, probably just a small portion of what we should probably be seeing in these next few months. Because I've been pitching pretty hard at both campuses, that there's a neighborhood improvement aspect of this among college students that are looking to kind of integrate into the housing work groups, neighborhood improvement piece. And so I take Dave's point, and I think maybe that some of these that may be budgetary, I don't know if there are complications or not, but if there's redundancy in the efforts and we're looking at things that are going to be, that were budgeted and we're planning on doing, we could probably have a conversation around some of those things prior to them coming.
Right, but just to be clear, that's not the case here. This is an additional planting that is.
No, but my point, right, is that's city beautification. We shouldn't be using this program as regular city beautification.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if I agree there, David. That is kind of one the program. The city can only do as much as the city can do. And there are a lot of people who are looking at various aspects of neighborhood improvement
But what are we gonna do next? The group that wants to clean up Main Street and pick up garbage that we should be taking care of anyway? I disagree. I think the other programs that are on here are good programs. I even think that the Historical Society and Roots using money for the alleyway, letting that up, that's their private area. That's a good idea because it's gonna help the entire community. But when it comes to something on Main Street like that, and we're talking about city beautification,
if you were looking at
we
it,
should be doing
if you're
it.
looking at a group, for the sake of argument, if you're looking at a group that saw debris piled up and they thought that having a cleanup day would be something they'd like to do, which happens somewhat regularly anyway, would this not be something that in your mind's eye could be used
It
to?
depends on the area that we're talking about.
Okay.
If we're talking about Main Street or the city streets, no. If you're talking about certain properties, then sure, or even maybe the park, sure. But we already have groups going out to do this, and as far as the flower projects go, we already do those plantings. We do it specifically to make our downtown nice after a winter. To have a group that means well, that wants to plant flowers earlier than that, using this kind of money, I think it's misguided. I think that money could be put somewhere else. And if we decide we want to do that, if we do want to put flowers in earlier, then we budget for it. Similar to how we talked about having a city gardener again, that will do this work rather than relying on volunteers.
So, I'll go right with you, David. So, the colleges typically do something once a year. I think during the pandemic it fell off, but I'm pretty sure it came back last year into the streets. So and that is Main Street and the side streets and downtown and,
Yeah, but that's also properties. They go out into the streets. They don't just do.
I've worked with them. So we pick up in Muller Plaza, we pick up in.
Right, but they also go out to parks too, and other properties to do what they do.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of the argument that that would not be supportable if were they taking care of the downtown aspect and only outside of the downtown aspect.
Again, it depends on the group. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I'm trying to get.
They don't just go down and pick up our Main Street and pick up the garbage in the streets. They do other projects on the streets.
Okay, I'm probably done.
I just got a question, Dave, because I'm trying to follow what you're saying. So if we talked about like gateways, like say down in the 6th ward and in the 5th ward and the 1st ward, where they first come in, would you see that as part of this program, or would you see that part as the beautification?
Again, it depends on the project that they're doing.
Like, I'm saying like they're gonna plant flowers where our city signs are to kind of make it look nice as they come in. Would that be other beautification off of the budget or off this program?
It depends on what specifically they're doing and what we've done in the past out of the budget. I would not want to stop something to save money in our budget to then go to this program that have a volunteer group pull from this to do the same work that we've done in the past.
Okay. That there's no redundancy. that we're not.
Right, but I also
think we can get
don't want us, I don't want us to start relying heavily on this program and volunteers to do work that we should be doing.
I'm gonna go to Mark. I just want to say though, before I do, that a good piece of this is not the work itself that's gotten done, but rather the workers who are, combining forces and doing something that they can point to as something that they did personally that helped beautify and make this quality of life.
I understand that.
So that's part of this.
Every one of these projects, whoever is submitting them has good intent with every one of them. Doesn't mean that they're all should be, let me go to this money.
I'm gonna suggest the way to move forward is that, given Dave's concerns, we're a year into this program, I think roughly a year. I think it's time to kind of bring this back to the committee and just review it, have a conversation about, some of the points that you brought up. And with some more clarity, given that we now have a little better sense of what we need to do. And that way, then we can have this next year period, can have a little bit more focus and we can continue to improve this program. So I just think it's the best way to incorporate, what's going on here. I don't know if quality of life is the best place, but I think that, one of the committees would be the best place to look for it.
Actually, yeah, and we're about 8 months in actually. From the time.
And what Chris said is, I looked into it, and one of the applications, it is annual flowers, another one is the bulbs. So that would be what you're saying is why plant annuals when the city's gonna plant annuals a month later.
That's part of it, I think.
Yeah, no, yeah.
More of the point of what they're doing is something that we do anyway. We're
Right.
just doing it earlier when we could do that just as easily.
Right.
So,
I mean, is this something where like you guys want me to forward you the job form on the applications also? I mean, cause I could do that, I don't know.
Yes, Lynn, go ahead.
So to your point, you didn't make a mistake. It's right here. It says perennials and annuals, so you're fine. To Mark's point, I think it should go back to the committee. It's quality of life, and just let's hone in on it a little bit more and give it a little concentrated effort. So then you're just administrating the funds. You're not making the decisions, and I think you
Right.
sound a little frustrated and you need some clarity. So
Yeah.
let the committee look at it again. It's not stymieing anything, it's just trying to get more clarity.
Right. Right, because another question that came up was, okay, so these were all approved, the one for the lights, they were approved 2 months ago, but they're running low on they're running behind on their project, so they're like, okay, so we're running behind, does that affect the budget, does that affect anything? I was like, well, we didn't give you a time frame at the time, so I'm not gonna give you a time frame now, is kind of what I had said. So I had some questions too, like, okay, so should that still stay within that quarter? Or I was putting them in the quarters that we were paying out. It's kind of like how I did it with billing the city. And
that's a good structural question that probably we can weigh in on, at another time, give you some sort of sense of Jim. So we're gonna wrap this up. We'll go to your question, Scott, about the events, but just to bring it back on it from my perspective. So this is about absolutely enhancing quality of life in the city. That's the point that we were able to find the funds to do that. They would typically have gone back to the general fund. The scheme of things is a very small percentage of the general fund. But it's also, it's an enhancement of quality of life. It's also an empowerment of people and an ability for them to have the funding to improve their neighborhoods and strengthen their neighborhoods because of that. So we'll look at it. We'll bring it back to the Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee. We'll, make it more clear. We'll certainly clean up the application process so that the permit space isn't going.
but I'm wondering if people think, because you have to pay for the permit, but then I wonder if there's, I know we talked about it in the beginning as far as if they don't get approved, they would get their money back. Maybe if they're applying for the OCI program, there's a way that it's in there that there's no fee in the beginning to submit it. I don't know.
So we'll have.
It's,
some
yeah,
information
those are
discussion,
the kind of
and we'll bring
like
it to the
the,
Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee.
Which is next week, so we're.
Well, I don't know if we'd be quite prepared for that. I think it might be a good thing too, to have, some input from some of the folks that are, go ahead. Oh, in that case. Yeah, then maybe, so, sorry, maybe so, although I know that the, like, agenda is coming,
Sorry.
agenda is pretty full. Sorry, in any case, we'll bring it back, quickly. And, we'll bring players to this, maybe to speak, from their perspective, so that we are, hopefully a program that has value. It seems that in your comments here, your thought is that it has value, that we, get the most out of it that we can.
I'm glad on this one, make the decision.
Of course, I mean, who's doing this, right? We're inventing the wheel. Scott?
Just a real quick question about the street closures. When do you normally start working with the businesses?
We already have, I put a survey out, last week to all the downtown businesses, and we have received 5 submissions as of right now. As far as if they want something daily, weekly, or monthly, is kind of, and then if, you know, they would help. You know, stuff like that, what would be beneficial, to close the street, to not close the street, and to do an event. One question was if they thought it would be beneficial to close like Beach Street all the way up to like the library, have the library come down, do something there. The other way would be like right out here, and go all the way up to that parking lot by Kano. Have Kano do something that same time. We've got the parking lot there, you've got the parking lot at Walnut, and then you've got the parking garage. So you kind of have 3 spots to park. And, you know, those were just some options that we were throwing out there.
Thanks. Further questions, comments? All right, oh, yes.
I have, so something that was not in the report that I know needs to go in the report is the city workers down at the park. They were up on Main Street almost every day this year, fixing the tree, plugging the tree back in. People were sleeping underneath the tree, plugging other things in underneath the tree. You will probably testify to this, but almost every day they were there. I was getting phone calls of half the tree is not working, or there's big gaping holes in it. But that's just something that I appreciate the city guys taking care of. But it was a lot, and just I wanted to throw that out. I forgot to put that in the report. But I want to let you guys know that there was an issue with a lot of people messing with the tree and sleeping under it.
Thank you. We have.
Thank you very much, David. And if there's nothing else, I'm gonna go on with the agenda and we'll see if we have any, there are no public hearings, so have we petitioners? And if we do, you just introduce yourself and let me know who you live. No, we have none. Okay, well, very good. In that case, we will move to our reports, boards and commissions, Councilmember Tori Shu and the Parks and Rec Commission.
No.
Yes.
Okay, I was there and we discussed, sorry, just let me pull up my agenda, I'll be able to tell you. Yeah. Man, I wish I had the correct notebook.
You want me to come back to you?
Yeah, sure,
Sure.
that would be great, thanks.
In that case, we'll go to the Board of Public Service and.
Well, this is gonna be real quick. I was not there. I have not had time to review the video yet, so as soon as I do, I'll let you know.
Back the theme. So moving, then we're gonna give you a little bit more time,
Thank
Katie,
you.
and we'll move to Councilmember Davies and the Environmental Board, which actually, go ahead.
I was also not there, but I did review. It was a very short meeting. Thank you very much, Mayor, for beginning the meeting and convening. So the first order of business was they had to elect a chair. Frankly, that took a bit. There was a little, I think, concern about taking over that role, or perhaps a little resistance. But after several rounds of discussion, they did elect the chair, and Dave Ainsworth is the new chair of the Environmental Board. So they moved to committee reports and just to update you on the main points. The draft tree ordinance, they have sent that to Stephen Yearly for thoughts and on that, so they're certainly working with Stephen to begin to figure out whether they've got something there, so they moved that forward. The 20 elm trees that were planted in October, several of the folks from the environmental board, as well as our city arborist, went out and put tree guards around all 20 elms, and they reported that they actually look in really good shape. There's not been much problems or nibbling or anything else, so they might be able to keep those. They also discussed some of the organization committees, and I think like it was the start of a discussion, it did not seem to have a definite point, but they believe that they might need to think about the committee structure a little bit differently. That committee structure was created by the outgoing chair, so it seems like they will be having a little bit different committee structure moving forward. Like I said, short meeting, about 25 minutes. That's all I have to report.
Good. Questions? Okay, thank you very much.
That was precisely enough time for me to find the notes on my computer, so I really appreciate that. So, yeah, so first met on January 4th. It's a great meeting, as always. Parks Administrator Lansing gave her report. The Festival of Lights, was just ending in the park. Things were being taken down. They did have a car counter, so we'll get an updated report on the counts of cars that went through the park. We discussed the new fee schedule, which council approved a couple weeks ago. We also discussed some possibilities for counting for events. There's some mixed reactions on that, and the consensus was sort of to see how the new fee structure goes this year, which I think is a good plan, and we'll go from there. We got an update from the city clerk on the pavilion rental process. We had discussed in a previous meeting that the possibility of maybe asking for a deposit from people who are looking to rent pavilions. And so she was checking with the city attorney with what we can and can't do in regard to securing deposit. Let's see, Parks Administrator Lansing, I didn't really elaborate on this, but she discussed some new policies for efficiency and increased communication for major parks users. The dog park, this is actually old information because I just saw today on the Facebook, but at the time, the large park was closed for the winter season and all dogs were in the small park. But there's been some feedback from the residents that since we are having a lack of snow, that we'd like to see the large park back open, so that is reopening. It just as a reminder though, that there's no city maintenance once snow does fall, so kind of at your own risk. And then she was gonna work on removing COVID related language from the policies on Rec Desk, which is the online portal for reserving park facilities. Then there was some discussion on homelessness in our city parks. On the Armory survey, which basically the discussion is to just try to promote it as much as possible, to get as much feedback as we can from the community. Former chair Commissioner Beth Ashbaugh's term just expired a few days ago. He will not be seeking reappointment to the commission, so just recognize her service. She's a great advocate for the parks, so she'll definitely be missed. We discussed moving the Wilbur Park Master Plan to the Quality of Life Committee. That had been previously approved by the Parks Commission. And so that should be on an upcoming agenda at the click. And our next meeting is in 2 weeks at 7 o'clock, February 6th.
And they make sure that they get that well in advance to the quality of life committee, so we can read that.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad it's done, but
Yeah.
I don't want to see it for the first time on that day.
Yeah, or even like Fridays.
Yeah, it's- that way if we have questions, Like we could ask you or whoever is here.
Yeah, and actually,
So-
Parks Administrator Lansing, I think, was planning on attending your next meeting, so
Okay.
she'd be there to answer questions for you.
Great.
Yeah.
Good questions, Sven.
I might have missed it, Katie, but what was the issue with the deposits? Why is that coming up now?
Oh, okay, yes, I'm sorry. So the pavilion rental fees, sometimes after a group has utilized pavilions specifically or parks facilities, they leave behind kind of a mess that needs to be cleaned up. And so, there was a discussion about maybe taking a deposit so that, to cover basically any sort of excess cleaning needed to. take place.
Isn't that part of the original fee for renting the pavilion?
The fee's $10, right?
No, it's not $10, but the highest fee is $140 for the out of town people for a large pavilion. It's specific to, there were 2 events, I believe, last season, that incurred some extensive cleanup by city staff. So they went above and beyond we didn't put a bag of garbage out, so.
Yeah.
In some cases like that, where there's extraordinary efforts in by the city to take care of the facility afterwards.
Yeah, like they had to like scale the hill in Wilbur Parkway.
There's been refuse tossed over the side.
Yeah.
That's not a new idea either. Other communities have done that.
Sure. Yeah, deposit.
For the same
you
reason.
get that,
Yeah.
as long as you
Yeah.
park right, yeah, so.
The town.
Yes.
Oh,
So could you
Okay.
just expound a little bit more on the discussion for the folks that are spending an extended period of time in the park? You call it homelessness, but now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right, unsheltered people, yeah, and basically just that we've seen as everywhere an uptick. In unsheltered folks in our community, it's been noticed for sure in the park, one of the places that was mentioned is along the new Mill Race Trail. Just that. Basically, the discussion was around, wanting to encourage people to continue to use our parks and how to. If you encounter a situation that is uncomfortable for some reason, how to. What to do in that situation really would be to call the police. Yeah, we kind of talked about why that might be happening and just about the potential impact that it could have on our park users.
Further questions, Tom?
Just, Katie, that's been big on Facebook lately is since we blacktopped all those trails. And the walk is the amount of debris and stuff left and I know we've been taking a hit on why we don't clean it up. But I mean, I think we clean as much as we can with the staffing that we have. We're short staffed.
We have cleaned up now our side of the race. Work on trying to figure out how we regularly fund side this one.
Yeah, I think our crew is taking a look at that.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted it out there that we haven't neglected it. We've been working. It's just, we're shorthanded like everybody else and we get there when we can get there.
And so along those lines, Greg, since it's affecting city staff and how much labor is happening because of the folks that are spending an extended period of time within our city parks. Has city staff come up with a game plan or some thoughts on or suggestions on how to maybe deal with this?
No, at this point specifically, other than keeping track of, trying to keep up on maintenance and keep cleaning it up, that's a very difficult question to answer. How do you solve the problem? People will wear the leaves or anything out there. Something to get a solution.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. And we'll move on to Zoom. And Luke Murphy, Councilmember Murphy, if you could provide us your report on the housing commission.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the pleasure of meeting almost all of the commissioners. Commissioner Baskin was absent, but everyone else was there. We got to meet on January 11th at 7 p.m. It was a deceptively short, it looked short, but it was longer than it was a longer meeting than it looks on the agenda. The first order of business was tabled, which was finding a new chair. In order to have the whole committee there, it was decided by the commission rather, that it would probably be in the best interest of everybody's time and energies to wait until the whole commission was there. That being said, we did get updates on the various subcommittees within or subcommissions within the Housing Commission. And in no particular order, Jared Goss is a new commissioner. He is on the short-term shared and vacation rentals. They unfortunately have not had a chance to meet yet or convene. So there was no report. Deb Marcus, however, who's on the Refugee and Resettlement Committee, has received a request to receive refugees, humanitarian refugees from Ukraine, and 2 families to start. They are still working on it. Things are kind of in a holding pattern until we hear back from the larger agency for refugee resettlement. But that is, from my notes, 2 families, and I believe they're from Ukraine. Jared Shu, who's on Smart Growth, informed us that his committee is looking into a grant program, I believe with Judy Pangman, our director of, our director, integrating smart growth into planning smart growth into planning and zoning usage. Jen, who is currently the chair for the moment until we meet again, Jen Armstrong, is on the infrastructure committee, which is looking at and working with city staff to look at the city maps, surveyed properties, to look at kind of get a tally of all city buildings to see what can be best done to develop and use these properties. She is also hoping to bring forth a recommendation with hopefully the agreement of the full commission to hire a full-time city development member within our 5-year plan. Nothing imminently. They're pretty aware of the budget situation, as well as looking at developing of the Westcott lot. Let's see here. Kurt Schulte, who's on affordable housing, they're still working on recommendations to bring before the whole board. Same with Bob Rosowski with senior housing. They haven't met yet. They're looking to meet or have just very recently met. And let's see. And Hannah was not present, but she did send in her notes. She's on neighborhood improvement, and they sent out a short survey about likes and dislikes about the various wards, and working on reaching out and improving or seeking comment for the website.
Thank you, Councilmember Murphy. Do we have questions or comments?
I do. It's for you, Mayor, actually. It's with regard to the Refugee Resettlement Task Force. It sounds like they are making progress toward their goal, which I think is great. I think I've been kind of thinking about it in terms of the context of the Housing Commission, and it's making less sense to me, I think, in terms of being a subgroup of the Housing Commission.
They're more, they are not actually, their group is not a work group that is, that has been generated by the Housing Commission. Theirs is a group, in fact, that's been meeting for about a year. And they are more reporting the various progresses and obstacles, whatever it might be that they are encountering. So theirs is much more of a reporting mechanism within the context of the commission.
Okay, suppose that makes sense. I'm excited to hear that they have 2 families lined up from Ukraine. That's great.
Yeah, in Deb's words, it's kind of a holding pattern until we hear back more from the more national or the bigger agency in terms of resettlement. But it sounds like things are moving as fast as they can on our end.
So with the structure of the group, which is basically that these sort of outlier task forces then report in, what is the expectation if they're sort of, yeah, I guess I just am
So the
wrapping my head around it.
Sure. So the expectation is that as they are meeting these first several times, they're determining within the context of what they've been assigned, what they feel the priorities are. And they are then landing on something that they might be able to generate as a proposal. Those conversations are then coming back to the Housing Commission, being vetted, being tweaked, going back to those work groups. There are for instance, a couple of different things that have been brought forward just in conversation being reported back from a work group that are not ready for proposal. And in fact, there's good information that will be, that they're already aware of in certain cases that kind of mitigate a little bit, or rather modify some of what the ultimate proposals will wind up being. Ultimately, though, the expectation is that they'll come back with proposals that the Housing Commission can get behind because they've had the conversation. And then those things will make their way to committees or councils. So we'll start to see some actionable items coming from multiple different perspectives.
And some of the subgroups, that makes sense, and I see that already sort of starting to percolate. I think with regard to specifically refugee resettlement, and even to a certain extent, neighborhood improvement, which also I'm very excited about because we need it. I think I'm not entirely sure how they fit within the scope of
So
the
neighbor,
work of the Housing Commission.
sure.
That
So
makes sense.
yeah, it does. So again, Refugee Resettlement Coalition, that is a group that's already been in existence, and they are reporting to us, and I think that's an appropriate place for that information to continue to be presented. In terms of neighborhood improvement, the rationale is that a house that goes bad is likely to take the house on the left and the house on the right with it. And then before you know it, you have blight. And with the current strain on the business model of student housing, there are potentially going to be some houses in which people don't invest in their upkeep. And so staying ahead of that through any number of different mechanisms is a good way to keep a neighborhood from going bad. In the meantime, one of the things that they had talked about, Luke, I'm not sure if it came up, I guess it wasn't in Hannah's notes, but it was in a meeting that I had attended of the neighborhood improvement, is they are connecting with the Fulton Block Builders. That particular group is to see what they can do about, again, bringing from the city of Fulton model, a conceit where you have multiple adjacent properties vying for funds that are a match, so that they to whatever they're able to bring to it, so that they're able to modify and enhance their curb appeal.
Okay.
And that program has done extremely well. No money from the city of Fulton has gone into that. ARPA money in this last round, just $5,000, but it's been going on for, I think, 7 years, and I think they've got, or 5 years, they've got well over 700 houses that have taken advantage of that. So they're looking at that model. So it's the neighborhood improvement in terms of our housing picture is our housing stock, making sure our housing stock does not take a visual hit during a downturn in the economic fortunes of the folks that have a lot of rental housing.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Again, sort of back to the refugee resettlement, we're talking about two families that we're sort of really talking about two homes, right? So I guess that question still remains for me, and it's, I can't know what I don't know, so I'll be watching.
Yeah, and that's right. And as we know it, they have a couple of living spaces that have been identified. But it's going to be a case of when do they get families for them? And if they don't get the families for them while the window is open on these two houses, then those houses may very well go to something else. And so, yeah, again, so we're more in a please report to us sort of a mode there, because otherwise we wouldn't know it all.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Further questions, Glenn?
Overall, who's the agency that's overseeing the refugee resettlement?
It's a Refugee Resettlement Coalition, I think is the, I may have that wrong, but it's something akin to that. And they've got well over 100 members, and they have a similar sort of a construct of individual concerns of housing and legal, and support and all these different things. So they, it's a very similar sort of a approach to trying to deal with a problem that is larger than a small group can really handle. So there's a regional innovation council that's happening at the colleges that's doing the same thing. So it's a model that we haven't tried here, and housing is so important. So try it.
Yeah, I would just like to correct the record. I want to apologize to Community Development Director, Judy Payne, if she's there. I was getting tongue-tied. I didn't mean to drop your title. I was just tripping over my words. So if you're there, I apologize.
No worries, Lou. All right, if there are no more questions for Lou, then we'll move on. Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy. And we'll move on to our committee reports, the Finance and Human Resources Committee. Chaired this
Oh
go
my
around by
gosh. So much more talking than I'm used to. So, yeah, Finance Committee met last week. There was a shift in the membership, which results in me sitting here and talking to you now. There are several motions on the consent agenda. Let's see, if anyone has any questions about any of those, I'm happy to talk about them. We had a presentation from the folks at the Stuart Wilcox House, about the project that they're hoping to undertake to place a historic barn on the property. And yeah, the barn has been gifted to them. They're in the initial phase. You'll see that there's a budget amendment here that comes out of their reserves to hire an engineer to do the initial groundwork for that. Let's see, we talked about. Okay, we talked about renewing the space on Main Street for the bus depot. The amounts there go up slightly this year and next year. Okay, yeah, gotcha. Those are listed. We started to talk about this at the end of our charter meeting as well, but there are some appointments here that have been recommended by the city administrator. They weren't necessarily approved by the committee outright, but we did approve putting them on the agenda tonight so that we can move those along. Yeah, does anybody have any specific questions? The only other thing that we talked about briefly was that I'd like to begin to kind of get through a lot of the checkmark action that happens at finance meetings and be able to maybe have some productive conversation on revenue generation, utilizing that time and space for that. So I think that will be something that I'll be reporting on in the future.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. So, Member Lori Shu, and we move to Member Raptor and the Legislative Committee.
I will, I don't have any notes on, so.
I volunteered to.
That's fine.
Help it out. We actually only had one item of discussion in this, and that is the demolition of garages or small outbuildings. This is something that came out of the planning commission meetings where, as of right now, if you want to demo your garage, you go to planning commission, it's a pretty straightforward thing. They don't think it's necessary to have this go through the planning commission anymore, so they're putting it back to committee to discuss it to try to make this a little bit easier. So when we had our discussion, while we agree we want to make it easier for people to demo something like an old garage or old shed, we don't necessarily want to make it easier for somebody to come in and just demo a garage that might have neighborhood character. We don't want to take away the character of the neighborhood. But we feel like we're kind of working surgically with this. So what we decided after talking in depth with Stephen Yearly was to come up with a list of criteria to consider when deciding whether or not to allow a garage or building demo to start the conversation with a committee. And we put that up on a Google document, so those of us on the committee can just add their input, what they're thinking. So some of the things that are on there right now are just considering the age of the structure, historical significance, square footage, meaning if it's under a certain amount of square footage, then it should be able to be demoed without going to the planning commission. Detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. So these are very general terms. We still have a lot more discussion to happen with this, to narrow it down and get a little more specific. So I think it's the beginning of a positive change.
Any Any questions, comments?
What do you, generally, what are you looking for as a character of the neighborhood garage?
Well, that's part of what we were talking about.
Give it to me.
Well, it came out of, that came out of, something that happened years ago where,
Or Maple.
on Maple, right, the carriage house. Right, so that's where that piece of it came out of. So how do you define neighborhood character though? So that's where this discussion is, of course, going to go toward, and we touch base on that quite a bit, anyway. Because it seems very subjective right now, I think we need to come up with an objective list of criteria. Right, the architectural review board may, that has yet to be appointed, may come into play a little bit with this. We might be able to reach out to them to get opinion on something. So it wouldn't necessarily carry weight, but they may be able to say whether it's historically significant or not. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's also important to note that, a lot of this has to do with streamlining the process, as Dave said. So if someone comes to the code enforcement office, looking for a permit to demo their outbuilding, code enforcement always does a site visit. So basically, if we can establish what the criteria is for them to be able to issue a permit without them having to go to a meeting. Especially because at this time, without the criteria, the planning commission is taking a subjective look at every single garage that comes up. So this will say, I think as Dave was saying, like, that if there's objective criteria, the code office can make that determination on its own, and if not, then we have these other advisory committees that we can kind of go further.
What it's trying to help is, or let's say, this is just one example, but somebody that has like a garage that was built in 1950, that's just undersized and maybe falling down, you want to just demo it and rebuild on site, so. But it's just the beginning of the conversation yet, so at this point, whatever we decide on, obviously, it's gonna come back through this body.
And if you have some thoughts, send them our way.
Yeah.
Legislative committee is largely philosophical, so we'd like to.
Well, we have a few garages that could be subjectively thought of.
Also, if I could jump in, one of the things that had happened in the past was larger houses that had either carriage house, what had been stables behind, they would be torn down, and then there would be, the next thing would be an application for backyard parking. Because they couldn't get a good, that way they could have multiple, they could put additional parking, gravel it, so that was deemed to be detrimental to the community as a whole. And simply saying, if you didn't need a permit, they knock it down first. And they said, well, we have this big space back here behind the building, so we can have multiple parking. So that may have been some of the interest in the past for requiring a permit, saying that they weren't going to be using it simply in order to have backyard parking or additional parking spaces for parking.
But since that particular case is so prevalent in our memory, it's also in the historical district, correct?
No,
That is not,
Just Walnut Street.
that was pretty close. Well, I thought it was
not part of it. But that's also what's been the discussion about the historic district and trying to protect the historic district, and why we now have an architectural review board that we.
It's literally one property up, that's on the other side of the nursing home.
That's what was such a.
Okay.
what was so disappointing.
My bad, I thought it was part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
As you said, it's the beginning of a conversation.
Right. Thank you.
So if no further comments or questions, we'll move on to the city administrator's report.
I was gonna forego tonight and report next week, if that's okay.
Same here. Mayor's report, mayor's remarks, we'll move along to other. Starting then with the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes, motion that the common council approves the minutes of the regular meeting held January 3rd, 2023. Number two, motion that the common council approves the warrants totaling $425,517.85, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. Motion number 3, that the Common Council approves the budget amendment totaling $1,750 as presented in the attached report. Motion number 4, that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to execute a memorandum of agreement dated January 20, 2023 with the CSEA Local 1000 ASME AFL-CIO City of Oneonta Unit 8101 to establish the title of Civilian Dispatch Coordinator, subject to all applicable civil service requirements, allocated to CSEA grade 10 with a standard workday of 8 hours. Motion number 5, that the Common Council approves the city administrator's appointment of Cindy Chandler to the position of Civilian Dispatch Coordinator at a base annual salary of $38,392, CSEA grade 10, effective January 20, 2023. This appointment is subject to the satisfaction of all civil service requirements. Motion number 6, that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to sign a 2-year lease extension with LFT Amsterdam. CO Levites, I might be mispronouncing that, Management LLC for the OPT Transit Hub at 104 Main Street for January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2024 for a cost of $20,634.24 for 2023 and $21,253.32 for 2024. This item is subject to review by the city attorney. Motion number 7, that the Common Council authorizes the Director of Finance to accept a gift in the amount of $1,000 from an anonymous donor to be restricted for the use of the Swart Wilcox House. Motion number 8, that the Common Council approves the following resolution. Whereas the New York State Department of Transportation has made available a grant program to which Albert S. Nader Regional Airport is eligible to apply. And whereas the city of Oneonta desires to apply for a grant, the project being described as a fuel farm by committing funds for the local match, funding shares being New York State Department of Transportation 90% and local 10%. Now therefore, be it resolved that the city of Oneonta Common Council hereby endorses and approves the project being described as the fuel farm with a total project amount not to exceed $1,343,927, with the local share not to exceed $134,393. And it is further resolved. The City of Oneonta Common Council make available all necessary funds to match the New York State Department of Transportation grant share of funds for said project, and further resolved that the mayor is hereby authorized to execute all necessary agreements on behalf of the City of Oneonta with the NYSDOT in connection with the project, and is further resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately. Do we have any to remove? None. Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to approve? Len, followed by Katie, and
Councilman Murphy?
Sorry, I was looking for the button. Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth?
Yes.
Councilmember LaFarge?
Aye.
Councilmember Carlton?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Rath?
Yes.
now motion number 9, discussion. Motion that the Common Council approves the city administrator's appointment of Harry J. Robinson to the position of maintenance worker at a base annual salary of $31,127, CSEA grade 4, effective January 2023. This appointment is subject to the satisfaction of all civil service requirements and pre-employment conditions. So I have a motion to approve. I've got Katie, followed by Lynn. And discussion? And if you vote.
Councilmember Murphy?
Got it this time. Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth?
Yes.
Councilmember LaFarge?
Aye.
Councilmember Carlton?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Rath?
Yes.
Motion number 10, that the Common Council approves the city administrator's appointment of Angela Chrisman to the position of heavy equipment operator at a base annual salary of $34,950, CSEA grade 9, effective January 20, 2023. This appointment is subject to the satisfaction of all civil service requirements. Motion to approve, Katie, followed by, let's say, Scott. And discussion.
Is this young lady related to the famous Ted Chrisman? Six warder.
No, there, no.
I mean, we're gonna have another generation.
Outside of,
I just, real quick. When you talk to her, our apologies on the council that we weren't here Tuesday, please.
appreciate that. All right, if there's no further discussion, Council, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Lenny,
Aye.
Councilmember Amy,
Yes.
Councilmember Lisberger,
Yeah.
Councilmember Parachute.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Henson,
Yes.
Councilmember Rath.
Yes.
Terrific. Motion number 11, that the common council concurs with the mayor's recommendations and approves the following appointments of city boards and board commissions. For the Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights, Jocelyn Plows, with an expiration date of January 14th, 2026. To the Environmental Board, Gina Keel, January 14th, 2026, her expiration date, and Sandy Bright, January 14th, 2025, her date of expiration. You might have it. Examining Board of Electricians, Dave Reese, January 14th, 2026 would be the date of his expiration there. HAML, Huntington Memorial Library Board of Trustees, Carrie Brunswick, December 31st, 2027, the date of his expiration. Oneonta Housing Authority, Rachel Lutz Jessup, January 14, 2026, and finally Zoning and Housing Board of Appeals, Luisa Montante, January 14th, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve? That was followed by Dave. And discussion?
We always have the same question every single time there. Can you just give the answer without the question?
All city residents.
Yes. Hey, our city residents, because you know, that's what we do here.
I heard that question an hour ago. I just wanted to say.
Yes, and nobody moved. All right, so if there are any, you have nothing, okay, very good. In that case, we'll.
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Lisberger,
Yeah.
Councilmember Parachute,
Abstain.
Councilmember Carson.
Yeah.
Councilmember Henson.
Yes.
Councilmember Rath.
Yes.
Wonderful. Now, additional business, do we have anything for council discussion? Dave?
Yes, we received a letter, as we all know, from former colleague the other day, and I'm wondering if we have any data. I think don't.
No, I haven't had the opportunity to sit down, who holds that data between you and finance,
Okay.
and it's a conversation also that Chris.
Will you predict that we might be able to get that?
I'm hoping to sit down with Chris next week.
Okay.
Fine.
The other thing I wanted to discuss is as far as Christmas tree and all our project goes. Was this new news? Were you aware that what we were told was going on with the Christmas tree? I didn't know about it.
It's new news to me, but it's not a surprise to me. Motor Plaza is one of, several people spoke, mine included. We need to, and we're going to energize that plaza and make it a place that is a congregate space and less attractive to folks that might be.
Well, one thing that came to mind was a discussion we had a few years back about, that actually keeps coming up, is how to change the, where the electricity is in that plaza. Is that something that we're still thinking about redoing, Greg, to try to improve? I'm wondering if that would have had even the slightest impact on what was going on with people climbing under and plugging into the tree.
Potentially.
I know it's major work to bring more electric to that plaza.
Yeah, that's not something we had worked.
The tree is also a teepee, and so it kind of presents itself to those who might look at.
Well, maybe we want to go back to getting a real tree.
I just wanted to say, we have video of some people, we have actually video of people going into the tree. Seem to be younger groups. At one point, there was a group of 6 people that piled into the tree, hung out there for a while, and then left. So I don't think they were plugging in and using the electrical outlets. I just think they were just going in and.
Clubhouse.
Right.
again, maybe we wanna go back to having a real tree instead of the fig tree where people can go in there and hang out.
One of the issues with that is there's no more big trees left in this area. That was one of the issues we were running into, is getting a big enough tree to fit into that area. So they were getting, every year, they were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That was one of the main issues.
Who is going to get the trees in the past?
Between DO driving around and city guys driving around, and then the city guys would go and cut it down and bring it up.
So we're just talking like in the Oneonta area, or are we going to other?
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't do it since I've been here, but I understand they would go over to the watershed. Or somewhere in the surrounding area. for that tree.
From what I understand, it was like city property.
Yeah,
That they were looking at, but I guess there was a whole bunch of acreage that they were looking, I'm not even 100% sure where they were going. So then for 2 years, we tried doing almost like the send us your tree. And we'll bring it, but it turned into, yes, take my tree, but it's all surrounded by my house and you have like a quarter of it left.
Right.
And then it turned into, okay, who's responsible for cutting it down if something happens, and that created a whole big liability thing, so then
What does Cooperstown do?
they.
Do they have a real tree or do they?
That's not a real tree. Okay.
New York City's pulled two from the town.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Well, that's really big though.
You know where the Rockefellers come, and you go grab the tree real quick.
I think those are too big.
I would.
But there might be more, there's certainly more.
I would suggest if, since this is a relatively new tree that we have, and now we have a new problem. If we can't fix that problem, we need to maybe look at a different type of artificial tree then.
You don't want my theory.
You elevated it, on like a platform, everything's
Just
locked
creating
in.
more of a challenge.
Well, it would prevent, I guess, the clubhouse effect, they're gonna have to climb up.
That would be a challenge for people.
Create an interior.
It's gotta be some kind of an interior barrier.
It just slipped over the top of it, basically.
I think it would put it on a pedestal. I think it's gonna be more of a fun challenge for college students.
But I don't even think we're talking about college students.
Oh.
no, the college students, the videos we have are college students, yeah. it appears to be.
All right, but clearly it's something now, here we are in January, we have 11 months until the tree goes back up, so maybe.
Got a lot of time to figure it out.
Well, if we have a lot of time, if we actually come back to it and figure it out, so, you know, maybe David, the DO is more involved in the construct of what goes up in Muller Plaza. That might be something that you guys can give some thought to, and maybe, I hate to keep loading up the click, because it seems like everything goes to the click. But I don't know what other committee would appropriately look at something like that, but maybe a few months down the road, if you can, you know, come up with some strategies, maybe that then does wind up appropriately at least being reviewed by the.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's anything that the committee needs to do a lot of there.
No, but if there's an interior barrier, whatever it may be,
According to us, I think that would be great, sure.
but let's not find ourselves right back here in November.
Yeah.
All right, any additional council? Yes.
I just want to back up for a second. Katie, during your report for finance,
Sure.
you're talking about the Stuart Wilcox house.
Yeah,
And there's supposed to be a budget transfer.
yes.
I don't see it on here. Am I missing this? Did we do this?
Like the second or third. Yes.
Yeah, that's the receiving gift,
That's the.
but I thought we had to do one for the
Yeah.
transfer.
And the budget amendment, if you open the budget amendment, which I have it in my email, which is why I say open it, it's from the sport Wilcox reserve. To whatever line.
Right. I believe, I guess my brain's not working. I just want to make sure we had it, because I don't want to hear stuff.
Yeah.
Further conversation, discussion here? Yes, Kim.
I was gonna say that I had the privilege of going to the celebration of the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King on Sunday. It was put on by the NAACP. It was a really great event, and I'm just really grateful that they put it on, and also that it was pretty well attended. So I think that that speaks to the spirit of equity and justice in our community, so.
I appreciate your stepping in for me. I was unable to be there at the funeral out of state, so thank you very much for that. And any other council? Yes.
I'm not council.
You're not council.
But I do have something.
Why not?
So back to the question of the OCI program. I forgot to ask this earlier, but I did remember after the fact that this morning, the committee did approve the both flower projects. Do I hold off on approving them? Or do I let them know they're approved, or let them know that it's in review still? Because I don't want to approve it if it
Well, you said it was already approved.
by the
Yeah.
by the committee, but I didn't let the person know yet.
Well, I think if it's already approved by the committee, that just let it go through, but I think we need to have a discussion about.
And we will.
Okay.
And getting back to that now, I know how jammed up the click agenda is for the next month, but let's maybe target the next meeting. So not this one, but the following meeting for a something that it can be presented around OCI. So that the question will be enough. Okay. Good. Any further council discussion? All right, correspondence, I know we have.
You have one item of correspondence with the writer and that's the into the record. Dear council members, happy new year to each of you and thank you for your work in making Money Mountain a special place for all. I have noticed many good things happening lately and a renewed sense of optimism. Most recently, the Festival of Lights and the return of our first night celebration was provided by Wilson Celebration for This year's Festival of Lights delighted thousands as we worked in the park, and an estimated 500 families came to celebrate New Year's Eve with free entertainment, children's activities, pizza, and ice cream. All of this was made possible by Hill City Celebration board members working hundreds of hours each, along with the support services donated at no charge by our local businesses, not-for-profits, the Otsego Chamber, SUNY Oneonta, and of course our own DPW employees. Events such as these are integral to the high quality of life which we so value here in Oneonta. For this reason, I was surprised by the recent decision to require organizations to pay hefty fees for providing public community building events, which include the Festival of Lights, Juneteenth, Pride Fest, Girls on the Run, Hometown 4th of July, and others. Hill City celebrations alone will be asked to pay close to $3,000 annually if they are to continue to provide us with Hometown 4th of July and the Festival of Lights. While I fully appreciate how challenging it is to balance the city's budget, it's important to remember that a budget is really a statement of values and priorities. I know from working with you that each of you consider quality of life to be at the top of that list. It is my hope that you might reconsider this decision and instead continue to work in partnership with the many other community organizations providing their services, labor, and equipment in Metro. We are fortunate to have volunteer organizations providing free, open to the public community building downtown events. Events which the city is not asked to subsidize. We should be doing all we can to encourage and support the volunteer organizations who, without requiring city funds, are creating and implementing the experiences we value and which have come to define us as a community. These community volunteers deserve our full appreciation. The only compensation they seek for their efforts is making Oneonta a better place to live. I hope you might reconsider these fees, which will make it even harder for them to continue to do what they do for us. Thank you, Gary.
I would just like to throw out, maybe a suggestion, if it's applicable, because we're gonna talk about it as quality of life. With the OCI, that might be an opportunity for those not-for-profits to apply to the OCI, correct? Up to $1,000.
Any further discussion on this topic, or we'll.
Well, I think we could save more, I think we should save the discussion until later, once we have more.
I would say yes, I would agree.
Because I don't know these numbers, I'm sure.
I think that's right.
That's how I hear them.
Let's work with empirical information and have a conversation based on that. But we appreciate the letter and so if there's no further council correspondence, no need for an executive session, right? In that case, there's a reason not to, we're gonna